You know that moment when you're sitting at your kitchen table late at night with all your bills spread out in front of you, calculator in hand, and you're just doing the math over and over, hoping the numbers somehow change. You've got your mortgage or rent, your car payment, your groceries, your utilities, your insurance, your kids' school stuff, your healthcare costs climbing higher every single month. And you're sitting there thinking, how is this normal? How does everyone else seem to be doing this without completely falling apart? You're making decent money, you're not living some crazy lifestyle, and yet somehow you need something like $70,000 a year just to keep your head above water. And here's the thing that really gets me. It's not just you, it's not some personal failing on your part. There's actually something deeply broken in how expensive America has gotten, and most people don't even realize they're in the middle of a genuine crisis. My name is Nick, and I spend way too much time analyzing why everyone feels broke despite living in the richest country in human history. If you're tired of feeling like you're falling behind financially no matter how hard you work, make sure to subscribe to this channel and hit that like button if this information helps explain why your bank account never seems to grow. Before we dive into the brutal math that's reshaping American life, let me ask you something. When you think about what it takes to live a basic middle class lifestyle, what comes to mind? Maybe you picture a modest apartment or small house, a reliable car, enough food to eat without constantly checking prices, and the ability to see a doctor when you're sick without going into debt. These aren't luxury items or extravagant lifestyle choices. This is literally just existing as a functional adult in modern America. But here's the shocking reality that's going to change how you think about money forever. That basic existence now requires an income that would have been considered upper middle class just 2 decades ago. The $70,000 threshold isn't some arbitrary number I pulled out of thin air. It's the mathematical result of what happens when every single category of essential spending experiences sustained increases that far exceed wage growth. We're not talking about temporary inflation that goes away after a few months. We're talking about a fundamental restructuring of what it costs to be alive in America, and the numbers are going to shock you. Let's start with the biggest expense that's crushing American families right now. Housing costs have gone completely insane, and I mean that in the most literal sense possible. The median monthly cost for homeowners with a mortgage reached $2,035 in 2024, up from $1,960 just 1 year earlier. That's a 4% increase in a single year, which might not sound dramatic, until you realize that wages didn't increase by 4% for most people. But here's where it gets really depressing. The annual cost of homeownership now takes up 47% of the median household income in America. 47%. The traditional affordability threshold that financial experts recommend is 30%, meaning we've blown past reasonable housing costs and entered territory that was previously considered financially reckless. If you're renting instead of buying, thinking you're avoiding this crisis, I have some bad news for you. Median rent increased to $1,487 per month in 2024, and that doesn't include utilities, which can easily add another $200 to $300 monthly depending on where you live. So we're looking at roughly $1,800 per month just for basic shelter, which translates to over $21,000 annually. And this is the national median, meaning half of all renters are paying even more than this. But wait, it gets worse. Some renters are getting hit with an additional $800 per year because their buildings use algorithmic pricing software that artificially inflates rental costs. Yes, you read that correctly. Software programs are literally making housing more expensive just because they can, and there's virtually nothing individual renters can do about it. Now let's talk about something that's hitting homeowners like a financial sledgehammer and affecting renters indirectly. Insurance costs have entered an alternate universe where the numbers no longer make sense. Homeowners' insurance premiums have been rising for 26 consecutive quarters. That's 6.5 years of nonstop increases, with premiums rising 40% faster than general inflation. The national average now ranges between $1,750 to $2,500 annually. but in some states, people are paying as much as $6,400 per year just for home insurance. Let me put that in perspective for you. In Nebraska, the average homeowner is now paying nearly $6,400 annually for insurance. That's more than $500 per month just to protect your house from disasters, which means some families are spending more on insurance than many people spend on food. And if you think you can just skip insurance to save money, think again. Only 88% of homeowners even have insurance anymore, and about half of those who don't have it earn less than $40,000 per year. These families are basically gambling their entire financial future because they literally cannot afford to protect their homes. Food costs represent another category where the numbers have permanently shifted upward, creating a sustained burden that affects every single shopping trip. From 2020 to 2024, food prices rose 23.6%, which is higher than the overall inflation rate of 21.2%. This isn't temporary sticker shock that goes away after a few months. This is the new baseline for what it costs to eat in America. The psychological impact is measurable and widespread. 90% of American adults report being stressed about grocery costs, and it's easy to understand why when you look at how much of people's income goes toward food. For households in the lowest income bracket, food costs consume 32.6% of their after-tax income. Even for families earning decent wages, food represents a significant budget category that continues to grow every month. Recent data shows food inflation continues at about 3% annually, with specific categories experiencing much steeper increases. Beef and veal prices increased 13.9% in just the 12 months ending in August 2024. If you're wondering why your grocery bill feels impossibly high, even when you're buying the same basic items, this is why. The cost of eating has fundamentally changed, and it's not going back to pre-pandemic levels. Transportation costs have experienced some of the most dramatic increases of any spending category, fundamentally altering the economics of basic mobility in America. Transportation prices grew 34.4% between 2020 and 2024, making it the fastest growing major expense category and significantly outpacing housing and food price increases. This isn't just about buying a car, though vehicle prices have certainly increased substantially. This includes fuel, insurance, maintenance, registration fees, and all the costs associated with basic transportation that most people need to work and function in society. In some states like California, transportation costs rank as the second highest in the nation, creating a compound burden when combined with elevated housing costs. Healthcare expenses continue to create financial devastation for American families, with prescription drug costs alone pushing many households toward financial ruin. The United States spends over $600 billion annually on prescription medications, more than any other country on a per-person basis, yet nearly 1 in 4 Americans reports difficulty affording their medications. About 30% say they have skipped or rationed doses due to cost, which creates both immediate health risks and long-term financial consequences when untreated conditions become more serious and expensive. Even people with health insurance face significant cost barriers. In the third quarter of 2024, 8% of adults reported not taking medicine as prescribed due to cost, 7% avoided needed medical care, and 6% skipped mental health treatment because they couldn't afford it. These aren't people without insurance. These are insured Americans who still can't access basic health care because of cost-sharing requirements and high deductibles. When you add up all these categories, housing, insurance, food, transportation, and healthcare, you start to understand why $70,000 has become the new survival threshold for American families. This isn't about living luxuriously or keeping up with social media influencers. This is about meeting basic human needs in a country where those needs have been priced beyond the reach of working class wages. The middle class has been completely redefined, and most people haven't gotten the memo yet. If you're earning between $53,000 to $161,000 annually, congratulations. You're officially middle class according to government statistics. But here's the problem with that range. The bottom end of that spectrum, that $53,000 figure, doesn't actually provide a middle class lifestyle anymore. It provides a lifestyle that previous generations would have recognized as barely scraping by. To understand what constitutes middle class income today, you need to look at geographic reality rather than national averages. In Jackson, Mississippi, a household needs about $49,000 to cross the middle class threshold, which is 13% less than the national benchmark. But in the San Francisco area, you need $66,700 just to reach the bottom rung of middle class status, and that's 17% above the national threshold. These aren't slight variations. These are completely different economic realities existing within the same country. The psychological impact of this shift cannot be overstated. A six-figure income doesn't stretch the way it once did, and in many states it falls right in the middle of the middle-class range. For some households, especially in expensive regions, earning $100,000 can feel close to lower middle-class income when monthly expenses pile up. This explains why so many people feel like they're failing financially, despite earning what sounds like good money on paper. Let me break down exactly how we arrive at that $70,000 survival figure, because understanding these numbers will change how you think about your own financial situation. When you stack up the median costs across all essential spending categories, the math becomes undeniable and, frankly, a little terrifying. Housing alone, whether you rent or own, will consume roughly $21,000 to $24,000 annually for the median American household. That includes rent or mortgage payments, property taxes, insurance, and basic utilities. Add home insurance, which now averages between $1,750 and $2,500 per year nationally, but can reach $6,000 in climate-affected states. Transportation costs will eat up another $11,000 to $13,000 annually. This covers car payments, insurance, fuel, maintenance, and registration fees. Remember, transportation prices increased 34% between 2020 and 2024. So even if you drive an older vehicle, you're still paying dramatically more for gas, insurance, and repairs than you were just a few years ago. Food expenses will require $8,000 to $10,000 per year for the average household. This isn't dining out at fancy restaurants or buying organic everything. This is basic grocery shopping and occasional meals out. And it reflects the 23.6% increase in food costs since 2020. If you have a family, these numbers increase substantially. Healthcare costs are where things get really ugly. Even with insurance, the average American household spends thousands annually on premiums, deductibles, copays, and prescription medications. Many families budget $3,000 to $5,000 yearly for healthcare expenses, but unexpected medical events can easily double or triple these costs. Then you have what I call the invisible expenses that somehow add up to massive annual costs. Internet and phone service, streaming subscriptions, car registration and licensing, clothing, personal care items, household supplies, and basic maintenance for your home or apartment. These seemingly small monthly expenses easily total another $4,000 to $6,000 annually. Don't forget about taxes, which represent one of your largest expense categories, even though people rarely think about them in monthly budgeting terms. If you're earning $70,000, you're probably taking home somewhere between $52,000 and $55,000 after federal and state taxes, Social Security, and Medicare contributions. This means you need to earn significantly more than your actual living expenses just to cover the tax burden. When you add up all these categories, you quickly reach that $70,000 threshold, and that's assuming you're not saving anything for retirement, emergencies, or future goals. It's also assuming you never take a vacation, never have car trouble, never need to replace appliances, and never face any unexpected expenses. In other words, $70,000 gets you basic survival with zero financial cushion. The most depressing part of this calculation is that it doesn't include any of the things that previous generations considered normal parts of middle class life. No annual vacations, no savings for your children's education, no money set aside for home improvements, no budget for hobbies or entertainment beyond the most basic level. $70,000 covers existence, not living. This is why so many Americans feel like they're constantly struggling financially despite earning what sounds like decent money. The cost structure of basic life has fundamentally changed, but wage growth hasn't kept pace. Median household income was $83,730 in 2024, which sounds reasonable until you realize that number needs to cover all the expenses we just outlined, plus taxes, plus any attempt at saving for the future. What makes this crisis particularly insidious is that it's happening gradually enough that people blame themselves rather than recognizing the systemic changes. When your parents bought their first house, the annual ownership costs typically consumed about 20 to 25% of household income. Today, that same ownership cost consumes 47% of median household income. Your parents weren't better at budgeting. They were living in an economy where basic necessities didn't require nearly as much income. The ripple effects extend beyond just individual financial stress. When basic survival requires $70,000 annually, it becomes nearly impossible for young adults to achieve traditional milestones like homeownership, starting families, or building wealth. The economic ladder that previous generations climbed has had several rungs removed, and many people are discovering this only after they've been trying to climb it for years. This also explains why so many college-educated professionals feel financially insecure despite having supposedly good jobs. A teacher earning $55,000, a nurse earning $62,000, or a police officer earning $58,000 are all technically earning decent wages by historical standards. But in today's cost structure, they're barely meeting basic survival requirements, which means any unexpected expense or desire to build wealth becomes nearly impossible. The geographic variations make this crisis even more complex. In some areas, $70,000 might provide a reasonably comfortable middle-class lifestyle. In others, it barely covers basic survival. This creates a situation where identical incomes provide vastly different standards of living depending on location, making it difficult for people to understand whether their financial struggles are personal failures or systemic problems. The most tragic aspect of this new reality is how it's reshaping American expectations and dreams. Young people are postponing marriage because they literally cannot afford to get married when basic survival consumes their entire income. They're delaying having children because raising a kid requires financial resources they simply don't possess. They're living with roommates well into their 30s, not because they enjoy communal living, but because splitting rent is the only way to avoid homelessness while earning what should be a decent salary. The American dream hasn't just become more expensive, it's been mathematically eliminated for anyone earning below that $70,000 threshold. And here's the kicker that nobody talks about. Even if you reach $70,000, you're still just breaking even on basic survival. You're not building wealth, you're not getting ahead, you're just successfully existing without going backwards financially. This creates what economists call a poverty trap, but for the middle class. You need substantial income to cover basic expenses, but those basic expenses are so high that they prevent you from saving enough money to invest or take risks that might increase your income. It's like being trapped in a financial hamster wheel where you're running faster and faster just to stay in the same place. Like, the spending categories stack up with ruthless mathematical precision, and once you see how they compound, you'll understand why so many people feel like they're drowning financially despite doing everything they were told would lead to success. Let me walk you through exactly how your money disappears before you even realize it's gone. Start with housing at $22,000 annually for the median household. Add transportation costs at $12,000, food expenses at $9,000, healthcare at $4,000, home insurance at $2,500, phone and internet at 1,800, clothing and personal care at 2,000, basic household supplies and maintenance at 1,500, car insurance at 1,600, utilities not included in rent at 3,000. That's already $59,000. And we haven't included taxes, retirement savings, emergency funds, or literally anything that makes life worth living. Now add federal and state taxes on a $70,000 income, which will consume roughly $15,000 depending on your state. Social Security and Medicare take another $5,350. We're now at $79,400 just to cover basic survival and mandatory tax obligations. This means you need to earn nearly $80,000 to live what previous generations would have considered a lower middle class lifestyle. But wait, there's more. We haven't included car payments, student loan payments, credit card debt service, or any attempt to save for retirement or emergencies. The average car payment is now over $700 monthly, adding another $8,400 annually. Student loan payments average around $300 monthly for borrowers, adding $3,600 more. If you're trying to save even 10% of your income for retirement, that's another $7,000. Suddenly, our survival budget has exploded to nearly $100,000 annually, which explains why even people earning six-figure salaries often feel financially stressed. The $70,000 figure represents the absolute minimum for basic survival, not comfortable living or wealth building. The psychological impact of this mathematical reality is devastating and widespread. People internalize financial stress as personal failure rather than recognizing they're operating in an economic system that has fundamentally changed without anyone officially announcing the changes. You end up feeling like you're bad with money when the actual problem is that money doesn't go as far as it used to. This creates a vicious cycle where people work longer hours, take second jobs, or pursue higher education hoping to earn more money, but the additional income gets immediately absorbed by the elevated cost structure. It's like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. No matter how much water you pour in, the level never rises because the fundamentals are broken. So there you have it. $70,000 isn't a goal anymore. It's the entry fee just to participate in modern American life. The math doesn't lie, even when we desperately wish it would. If this opened your eyes to why your bank account feels like it has a leak, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments which expense category shocked you the most. Your financial struggles aren't a personal failure. They're a mathematical inevitability in an economy that's been fundamentally restructured while nobody was paying attention.